Every writer has rough drafts of their novels and books, but I'm sure none of you watching have a draft as rough as this. This is what passed for literature in 7000 BC? Hello writers, readers, and all things in between. I'm A.U. Thor.
And my name's Jasmine Moore.
And today, we're going old. Really, really old. In terms of ancient literature, we have plenty to look back on and study. The oldest known work of solid fiction we know is the Epic of Gilgamesh from around 2100 BC. And older than that, we can find wisdom literature like the Instructions of Shurupak from around the early 3000s BC. However, archaeologists have uncovered stories even older than those. Well, calling them stories is a bit of a stretch. Yeah, a lot of these have sparked arguments over whether or not they can be considered writing at all. Proto-writing is the use of marks or representative symbols to communicate information with no or little sign of formal syllabic structure. Even the name Proto-writing means primitive or precursor to writing. And to start, we've got to go back, way back, to the good old 7000s BC, where the tribes hunted and gathered, and there was believed to only be a population of about 10 million. Compared to today's 7 billion, that sounds like an introvert's dream. In the Neolithic settlement of Jiahu, which is current-day Hunan, China, someone started writing. Of course, our primitive author's name has long been lost to time, but they certainly made their mark. I swear, no pun intended. Horrendous puns aside, our mystery author used a sharpened tool to make marks on a tortoise shell. And what was this prolific masterpiece of writing?
Hold on to your butts.
Yep, this is what's in contention for the earliest writing in history. Clearly it's not going to win a Pulitzer Prize. Then again, if no one else was writing at this time, technically it would win by default. In the 2013 book, A Companion to Chinese Archaeology by Anne P. Underhill, she details the results of a dig that uncovered these artifacts. According to Underhill, the team uncovered 17 groups of symbols on turtle shells, stone, bone, and pottery. The Jiahu symbols appeared on a stone tool shaped like the end of a sword handle, and was buried with an aged female. While we may never know the story of this alleged swordswoman, Underhill lays out what story this proto-writing might be trying to convey. The Jiahu symbols have been compared to the oracle bones found in Yinshu, including how they were both made with a sharpened tool on bone, like the turtle shells, and their connection to divination. The Yinshu oracle bones have been called Yinshu divinatory texts, and Underhill notes that the inclusion of the Jiahu symbols in a burial could also point to a connection with divination. Professor Trelawney would be proud. A few other archaeological sites have proto-writing dating to around the same time frame. From the Dadiwan culture, in what is modern-day Kinan, painted symbols were found on pottery. From the Damati culture, 8,453 individual cliff carvings are believed to tell stories relating to the environment and society at the time. Experts have identified talk of celestial bodies like the sun and moon, among others, as well as tales of hunting, herding, and fighting. But not everyone agrees. It's a hotly debated topic on whether or not the Jiahu symbols are actually a precursor to later Chinese symbols at all. I'm no archaeologist though, so I'll let the academics hash out the minutiae. And it's the same story for the European Tartaria tablets in Romania. Dated to around 5,500 to 2,750 BC, they'd be about 2,000 years younger than the Jiahu symbols. They're arranged in rows, and with a standardized shape to the symbols. It's the same idea as having 20 people write the letter A and still recognizing it as the letter A. Some scholars claim at least one of the tablets to have a written story about a hunt involving an unknown figure and a horned animal. However, some debate that you can't quote-unquote read this quote-unquote writing. It's more like looking at a cave painting and finding the story, they say. So, big surprise, the ancient writing fandom can't agree on something. Some things never change. But then, what's the oldest non-contentious example of proto-writing? Something with a story beyond it probably has something to do with something divine, or the person do the hunt on the animal. Well, ironically, the least contentious proto-writing is one that we haven't even found evidence of, that being Proto-Eupradian. This proto-writing is associated with Sumer culture, around 550 and 4800 BC. No, not Sumerian culture. They're similar in name but different. And also not Sumer culture with one R. Scholars suggest that it's a mix of different languages in what would become southern Iraq. But like I said, we don't have any solid examples of it, so it's still just a hypothesis, even if it's generally accepted in some form or another. The later you get in exploring proto-writing, the closer you get to cuneiform, which is an accepted writing system, often associated with ancient Egypt. Cuneiform is basically using organized symbols to communicate something. Does Dave want to tell me his dog is sick? Boom, symbol for dog, symbol for sick. Do I want to tell Dave that my cat is sick? Boom, symbol for cat, and the same symbol for sick. Then, the Egyptians couldn't stop innovating, and hieroglyphs morphed to represent sounds made by humans, and that's when you're definitely outside of proto-writing. Okay, thanks for the history lesson about a bunch of writing that even academics can't understand the stories of, but can I read any of this mythical proto-writing and understand it? Can it help me in writing my novel, book, or short story? Well, let's circle back to China for a minute. Early in the video, I mentioned the Jiahu symbols were compared to the Yinshu divinatory texts, or the Chinese oracle bones. Fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender are probably familiar with these. In Season 1, Episode 14, The Fortune Teller, Aang, Katara, and Sokka hear about Aunt Wu.
Aunt who?
No, Aunt Wu.
And head there to hear their futures. While she reads Katara's palms, she brings Aang to a room with fire and bones. She tells him to cast one of the bones into the fire and she'll tell his fortune. Her method is based directly on how the real-life oracle bones were used, except Aunt Wu did skip a step. In actual history, the oracle bones were first carved with proto-writing, often asking for predictions on the weather, good luck, and the fate of rulers. We see some of this in the Avatar episode when the gang first hears about Aunt Wu. She used the oracle bones to predict the rain, and sure enough, they get caught in a downpour. Dating to around the Shang dynasty in the second millennium, around 150,000 pieces were found. They detail the pyromantic divinations of the last 9 kings of the Shang dynasty. They sport over 30,000 distinct symbols, of which experts have deciphered around 2,000. To my knowledge though, and personal research, I don't think these have been published in any publicly available collection of sorts. Sure, it might not be the Epic of Gilgamesh, but having the earliest collection of literature be a detailed account of kings and soothsayers navigating ancient China with fortune-telling bones consulting their deities? I'd read that. Someone contact Penguin Books and tell them to get on publishing this. And the thing is, experts believe the writing of the oracle bones to be way too advanced, and they've suggested hypothetical precursors like the Proto-Eupradian. They suggest a sort of something that spanned at least 100 years or more. But once you start reaching back to before you have any physical evidence, you start running into the more mythological origins. According to Chinese myth, the Yellow Emperor Huangdi had an official historian, Shangji. Now, I never understood the 4 eyes insult for people who wear glasses, but Shangji bullies would have had good reason because the guy literally had 4 eyes. This China of myth was a world full of oddities, fantastic beasts, and much more. Shortly after the unifying of China, the Yellow Emperor, dissatisfied with how they previously recorded information, tasked Shangji with creating a writing system. Shangji took this task and traveled to the bank of a river. However, after some time passed, he couldn't come up with a single symbol. And another day of trying to form a new writing system, Shangji cast his 4 eyes towards the heaven, where he caught sight of a phoenix. The phoenix had something in its beak, which it dropped. Shangji hurried to inspect the object and discovered it to have left a peculiar hoof print which he did not recognize. He was able to stop a hunter and ask for help identifying it. Upon seeing the hoof print, the hunter told Shangji that it was a unique hoof print of the Pishu, a sort of winged lion in Chinese mythology. And this was the inspiration that Shangji needed. His talk with the hunter led him to believe that he could boil down everything on Earth to its unique characteristics, a very Plato-like approach for all the philosophers out there. Shangji paid special attention as the days passed and created characters to signal celestial bodies like the moon and stars, the birds and the beasts, everything. The Yellow Emperor was very pleased and called together the 9 provinces for Shangji to teach his new writing system. And that night, the Chinese people heard ghosts wailing and demons crying because the human beings could no longer be cheated. Also, it started raining rice, because our story of the 4-eyed protagonist wasn't strange enough. Like all myths, this one has a few different versions. While I told you the most popular one, there is a more interesting take in relation to proto-writing. When Shangji ventured down to the riverbank, instead of a phoenix, he encountered a turtle. After observing the network of veins on the creature, he was struck with inspiration, which would be perfectly fitting given the Jiahu symbols, which were carved in part on a tortoise shell. Outside of China, you have a few other developing forms of proto-writing, such as the Indus River Valley, with stamps and pottery bearing the Indus or Harappan script. Slavic runes predating Christian missionaries are also believed to be a form of proto-writing, but none have been discovered. So all of that is good and swell, but if you're a writer here, you probably want to know how learning or reading proto-writing can help with your own stories. Before we jump into that, if you made it this far into this video, why not subscribe and ring the notifications bell? Not only do you get to hear amazing videos each week, but you make us happy to see you stick around, right?
Sure thing. So subscribe and ding the bell to let YouTube know you want to see more.
And if you're interested in other old writing, I've started an entire playlist because, good lord, do I like talking about the obscurest writings ever dredged up. Check out my Book of the Dead video, that was a fun one, and I have plenty more in store.
Stay tuned, baby.
Now back to ancient civilizations, how can our author predecessors help us today? Well, you probably won't be pulling a lot of literary techniques from proto-writing, but the themes and development certainly can. The common themes seen throughout a lot of proto-writing is its practicality, seeking knowledge from the gods and deities, royal interactions, a focus on the highest powers at the time. There were no frills or extra language beyond what was absolutely essential. The earliest writing wasn't concerned with the average Sumerian. While you can dig into ancient mythologies that likely began as oral tradition, pulling normal people up to become a hero like the flood stories of the world, these earlier writings were likely written by people higher up on the social food chain. After all, even by the medieval ages, most lower-class citizens didn't know how to read.
I can't read.
And we can see this in some of the earliest writings that experts have deciphered. A lot of ancient writings is just a list of kings. While this is great for dating and piecing together a timeline, you can't really glean any kind of story from that. So you'd be stretching to call it artistic in the literary sense. So if you're crafting a story set in ancient times, and I mean real ancient times, you can try incorporating these things into your own writings. What deities would these characters consult? Do common folk revere their rulers like gods? Keep language simple and practical. It'll really go a long way for giving your story the feel of ancient proto-writing. Proto-writing as a genre/field of study might be a contentious topic for academics. However, for artists and writers, we can see how our predecessors started the craft. Long before purple prose and flowery descriptions drew people into a work, writers were concerned with conveying the most important information. So while proto-writings might not be getting a blockbuster franchise anytime soon, it helps us understand the humble origins of recorded storytelling. And hey, ask any writer and they'll tell you we had to start somewhere. Well, I don't think I was personally making scratches on a turtle shell to tell stories when I was younger. Actually, what about those drawings I made on the living room wall with a fork? Did I make my own proto-writing? Yeah, maybe I'm going a bit too deep. Until next time, keep on writing.
Catch you later, baby.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening into today's broadcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell to never miss another one of our fancy newfangled moving pictures.